turn the recorder on, say today is October 27th, 2015, and my name is Larry Morrissey. I'm here with Mr. Loy Moncrief, and we're in the, what room is this in the
This
church?
is the cry room, and also a Sunday school room.
Okay, so we're kind of the front room of the, right in the entrance of the church here
Yeah,
at Wells.
Yep. This actually, they would say, is Aunt Betty's room.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, she's matriarch of the church, been here forever. Taught the Sunday school class in this room for probably 50 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. She's a mainstay at Brookhaven and volunteers all over the place and everything. Really nice lady, a Bible scholar.
Wow. All right, well, so we're here to talk to you today about your time here at Wells and the different things you've been involved with here for the oral history project here at the church. I want to start off, if you could talk about give us a little bit about your background, where you were born and where you grew up, and maybe a little about your parents and family.
Okay. I grew up in Brookhaven, one of 4 children. My dad was a truck driver for a drilling company. We moved to Brookhaven in 1946 when they had just discovered the Brookhaven oil field, and were developing the oil field there in Brookhaven. So he was driving, hauling drilling equipment from West Texas and Louisiana over to Mississippi to do that in conjunction with that. Was gone from home a lot. But I went through all the public school system there in Brookhaven. I think I got a really good education there. I was a good student. Graduated second out of 100. Was pretty good. Then I went to Millsaps College for a couple of years. Didn't know what I wanted to be or what I wanted to major or anything, so I quit and went in the Navy for 4 years. Was a dental assistant in the Navy. And then after I got out of there, I went to LSU and graduated from LSU, and I have a BS in English. For whatever reason. I had more hours in that than anything else, I think, and a minor in journalism.
Okay.
While I was going to LSU, though, I had been working at night as an operator for a bank, a computer operator for a bank, and took some tests there and had good aptitude, and they always said that that's what I needed to do. So I wound up on graduation coming to Jackson and got a job as a backup operator and programmer trainee at the Highway Patrol, and used IBM self-instruction manuals and taught myself to be a COBOL programmer, and did COBOL programming for them for about a year and a half, and then my boss actually became the acting head of the Central Data Processing Authority at the time. This was in 1969, and when he moved, he asked me to come with him and work there and do some programming for him there, which we did in the basement of the Woolfolk building back in the 70s. I also, at that time, got involved with New Stage Theater and was a volunteer there. Was their lighting director and designer for several years, and met my wife there, my first wife, and we have a son together. Actually, which kind of leads into the gardening things. At one point, after we'd been married a couple of years, decided we wanted to have a child, and we did, and had a son, and lost the son to sudden infant death. And I had been studying some about polarities, how things on the opposite end of the spectrum are actually the same things, just along the same degree, like moving from hate to dislike to okay to like to love, but polarities, and have been studying polarities. And so I asked, the Creator, what do you do in the face of death? And the answer was, you nurture life. So I went out and dug a garden and started planting bushes and flowers, and got a cat and a bird and goldfish and houseplants, and but really got into the gardening at that point. And before long, I was gardening for other folks. And one of the folks I was gardening for was Julie Mabus, who was Julie Hines before they got married. We worked for her and did some work for her. Then I was working at a health and spiritual retreat in Georgia, and came home on the weekends and did some gardening for Ray Mavis before they got married, and finished the project on time and under budget, and just in time to vote for him for governor. And then he called and asked me to come and take care of the house and grounds there for them, and did that and a lot of other projects for them. But it really got me on the road to gardening. After I worked for them for 4 years, I moved to the country and lived on 50 acres out from Raymond on Old Port Gibson Road, and had a little New Age church that met at my house at that time, and gardened there, did some organic vegetable gardening and some other flower gardening and thing there, and stayed out there for several years, and then moved back to town in the late 90s, 97, my son's last year in high school. And my sister had been coming here to Wells for 35 years, I think, or so. And she had been always wanted to tell me to come here, and I said, well, I've got my own church going. But once I moved back to town and decided that church wasn't going to continue, I started to come to Wells and fell in love with it right away. When I got here, they had just had some work done on the grounds here. Somebody had died, I think his name's Jim Morrison, and had left some money for the church for neighborhood beautification. And they apparently polled the neighborhood and asked what they would like for us to do. And they said, well, take care of your own space. So they did, and installed some of the work, some of the things that surround the building here and the parking lot and a little bit across the street, and installed, planted bushes and shrubs and trees, and made a few flower beds and things. And they had just finished that apparently not long before I arrived on the scene, and they were trying to decide what to do about it and how to take care of it, and they asked people to adopt sections of the grounds and get families or people or individuals to take care of different sections of the garden. And they tried that for a little while, but it didn't really seem to, they didn't have a very good response for that. So I was talking to Keith. We always call our pastor by his first name, Keith. So I was talking to Keith one day and walking in the garden, and he was talking about that and how we had tried the adoption process, and that really didn't work. And I told him, well, I would take care of it and be glad to do that, but they'd have to pay me because it's a big job. There's a lot of property. And we negotiated a price right quick, and I started taking care of the grounds here. And this was probably in 1998, so it's 17 years ago. And so I've been taking care of the grounds here since then. It's grown a lot since then. We've acquired more property and added other buildings, and done a good number of things to enhance the property and to make it look better and help it take care of itself.
Yeah. Let's go back just a little bit.
Okay.
Talk about kind of growing up in Brookhaven. Was your family a member of a church?
We did. We grew up in the Methodist Church in Brookhaven, and I was one of those. Our family was one of those where we went, Sunday school and church and youth meeting on Sunday evening and Sunday night church and Wednesday night prayer meeting and sang in the choir and did the whole route. I was pretty involved and interested and liked that. It was a real good, large part of my social life was through the church there.
But then you had your own church for a while. So did you try? Tell me about kind of your journey from childhood to where you are now a little bit.
You mean as far as church?
Yeah, as far as your religious experience.
Okay. Like I say, I was very involved growing up and really committed to spiritual life when I was like 8, and always tried to be right and do good. And it kind of wore me out after a while, though. I got where I wanted real hard to have some sort of religious experience. and maybe or conversion or something. Maybe I had that at a really early age and don't remember it, but it never did happen for me. But I pursued that, and very diligently for lots of years, and all through high school. And finally, when I got through with high school, I thought, I've had it with that. I'm just not even going to think about it anymore. I'm just going to separate myself from the church for a while and do my own thing. So I did, and I didn't really get involved with church all through college and military, and again at LSU College. And while I was involved with theater some, I went to some other churches, and when I got married, we shopped around for churches, and I think at one point we even joined Northminster Baptist at one point, and I attended at St. Andrew's downtown cathedral for a while. But I always kind of had my own belief system, and when I finished at the governor's mansion, I decided that I wanted to. I had remarried. It was the second marriage, and both of my wives were really spiritual women, and has some gifts in that regard, and encouraged me to do things in the church, and particularly this second wife, Joyce, and I decided that we wanted to start the church together, and she and I formed an organization and did a fair amount of stuff on our own, and really formed a church on our own, not as part of not as part of a denomination, but as just an independent church. And we really mainly just studied what we wanted to study, and read what we wanted to read, and did meditation, and sang, and prayed, and read whatever we liked. We did and studied all the religions, and looked for unity and commonality among those. But it was after I came back to town that I actually came to Wells and started working in the Methodist Church.
Yeah. So your sister had been a long-time member here, you said.
Mm-hmm.
What did she tell you about this church to try to encourage you to come? Sounds like she's been talking to you about it for a while.
Well, mainly that how much she enjoyed the preacher, and what a good fellowship it was, and how open a fellowship it is. And she knew that would appeal to me, because I really am for racial reconciliation. I am for inclusion of people, whoever they are, whatever race, sexual preference, whatever. So those things she knew would appeal to me, and the music program. The music program is really good. She and her husband were singing in the choir, and a good Sunday school program. They encouraged me in that regard. When I first came, I actually went to a Sunday school class at Northminster Baptist with a couple of folks from the church here who went over there to Sunday school, but then came to church here and interacted with the Institute for Interfaith Dialogue. So I'm really more globally, I think, spiritual more so than religious or Methodist. Mm-hmm. But I can do that in the context of the church, and love the church, and particularly their ministries and what they do in the community and what they stand for. Loving, caring, and sharing is our motto, I guess you would say, and it's on our sign out front, and it's what we really like to do. So stay involved from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm. So as growing up Methodist, was there anything, when you got here, was there anything that kind of was familiar, or was the whole experience different?
The worship service is much more informal and interactive than what I grew up in. Growing up in the Methodist Church in Brookhaven in the 1950s, you sat still and quiet and stood up and sang when you were supposed to, and sat down, and not much. But here there's interaction between the pulpit and the congregation, and people are not hesitant to speak up or to interact in that regard. And it just seems like more of a fellowship, an open fellowship, where people are real quick to accept other people, real quick to embrace other people, accept other people. I mean, we really do make an effort to welcome people off the street in this neighborhood, and to encourage people who might not be accepted otherwise. We have interracial couples, we have gay couples, we have a lot of people in recovery from addiction. We feed the hungry, do a food pantry here, and those things really appeal to me. And it's one of the reasons I really like to come here. I keep it's called Edible Forest across the street, just south of us. There was a house there, and we bulldozed the house. It was falling down, and leveled the lot off and tried to figure out what we were going to do. And I happened to run into a lady from the Urban Forest Council, Donna Yowell, and she said we just had thought we might like to plant some fruit trees over there. Thought that would be a good idea. And she said, well, she had just the thing. She'd written gotten a new grant and was looking for somebody to do a pilot project. So we did a pilot project for her, and planted fruit trees and berry bushes and raised bed vegetables, and continued to keep that up now across the street. Of course, being a gardener, that was perfect for me. So we have apples and blueberries and peaches and plums and all sorts of good things over there. Some permanent herb beds and asparagus beds, and food products, and the people in the neighborhood come and eat from the garden.
So is it primarily you, or are there other people with the church who work on it with you?
There are a few. I've got a little group of people who come and help me twice a year to plant a fall garden, and then in the spring plant a spring garden, and then just do some general cleanup work from time to time and keep the garden looking nice.
Talk about kind of the landscaping and just the visual presentation, and how you feel that connects into the mission and the focus of the church.
Okay. 2 or 3 things. One thing, when I first got here, I wanted to create a spot across the street for us to do sunrise service. And in my mind, I thought, well, I would like to have a cross there. And I don't know if you've seen it or not. There's all these paintings of Jesus on a rock praying in Gethsemane. I said, well, I want a prayer rock, and I want a cross, and I'd like some water there. And started shopping around for what I would like to do in there, and found a friend and I had stacked some cedar trees and take the limbs off of those, and he donated those and made a nice cross. And in one of my prior incarnations, I was a basket maker, and I knew how to make to lash the cross pieces together with a Native American knot called a God's eye, which I thought was just fabulous to lash a cross together with God's eye knot. And so I did that, and then I there was a place in Brandon called Morgan Family Stone, and found a rock that I really liked, and I thought I would really like to have this, and it was like $300 for him to bring it and set it up. And I was over there working in the garden one day, and Keith came over and asked me what I was doing, and I told him, I said, I really found this really great rock I'd like to put right here, and hinted that maybe it was in the budget or something, but he didn't bite. And
Yeah.
Finally, I said, could I just stand up one day and ask for donations in church? And he said, sure, which I did the next Sunday, and got more than I needed to place the rock over there. It's a nice big rock, huge, and we just put it down. It was really perfect for our first sunrise service since I'd been here. And but right after that, a lady came and her name's Martha Burkhaw. She helps me in the edible forest. She came and said she had been down to the trademark, and there was a big rock down there that she thought we needed to have in the garden, and the guy down there wanted us to have it, and would I come and look at it and think about it? So I said, well, yeah. I love rocks, and I've written an article about this for our church newsletter. So I went down there with her, and it's beautiful rocks, about 8 feet long and shaped like a bench. And I said, man, that's really cool. And I asked her how much it was, and she told me, and she said, this guy really wants us to have this rock. And I said, yeah, that guy don't want to take that rock back to Crystal Springs. So she said, I'll write him a check, and then I'll raise the money from my Sunday school class to pay for the rock. I said, okay, suits me. I found a spot that I thought would work really well for it, doesn't it? It sits up on Bailey Avenue and looks back down across the park and across the church property. It's a really nice rock. And I went down the next day and told the guy that I would meet him over here. And he came over here, and we took these huge levers, and he had a truck that just kind of tilted up where it would slide off. But then we took these levers and scooted it around and pushed it into place where we got it sitting where I wanted it to be, where it would look right and people could sit on it and look back at the garden. And I thought, man, I stood on top of it, and I said, yeah, this is perfect. The guy could see that I really loved the rock. And I said, I'm so glad you told Martha, we wanted the rock and we appreciate it. And he said, I really want y'all to have this rock. And he said, I said, well, no, I appreciate that. And he took Martha's check out, and he tore it in half and gave it back to me. He said, I was serious. I want y'all to have the rock. And shamed me for thinking otherwise.
Yeah.
But it worked out really, really well. It was so pretty. And then maybe 6 or 7 years ago, somebody called the church office and said they were tearing down a house over in Meadowbrook Highlands, I think, that had belonged maybe to the Primos, and somebody was going to build a house there and offered the church to come and scavenge things out of the house, wiring and air conditioners and stoves and tiles and all sorts of stuff that we got out of the house and have since used here on the church property or given to people who needed it. But they were all these really big rocks. I don't know where you've seen these out front or not, but
Oh yeah.
There were a lot of those scattered around the house. So we started moving them and stacking them over here on the grounds. And a storm came that night, and we had to quit. And because they had to use the equipment to go help storm victims. But they called us the next day and said, we didn't mean for you to get the rocks.
Uh-oh.
So we had about 8 or 9 of them, and we were stacked by them. We said, oh, sorry, so we won't get any more. and didn't offer to take back the ones we had already gotten. And we left them stacked down there for a good, for several months until we were
Sure.
So nobody said they weren't going to come back and make us take them back to them.
Yeah.
But I was really excited, and I found a good friend to help me place them around the church. And they are really, really big rocks. And I wrote a little article for our newspaper, and it said Wells Church Rocks, and told about how we gather all the rocks.
How do you have any kind of philosophy about them in terms of connecting them to kind of the faith life here? Or?
Well, there's all sorts of symbolism for rocks.
Sure.
I mean they're just solid and steady and always there and good support and good stable things. Interesting that I discovered that they do sink over time as time goes by because they're so heavy they begin to sink down into the ground. I'm sure there's symbolism. Keith could preach sermons on them, I know. But they always have just been special to me. Other people go on vacations and come back with T-shirts. I come back with rocks. just about got back from the West Coast and brought back rocks with me in my luggage. We also have I made a little garden up across the street above a parking lot, and it's a reflection garden, and it's often backing away from the rest of the church grounds, but you can walk up there. It's a nice little rock stone path goes up into that garden, and some benches on either sides, and a little pool in the middle, but a place for people to go and sit and be still and quiet and reflect. And staff and clergy use it there, and it's a really nice spot. I got somebody to help me design that and install it. Some of the other things we acquired as we acquired property, I've kind of had to design or took it upon myself to do, figure out what to plant around it. And I tend to, I'm more of a perennial flower gardener where I don't have too many things to plant every year. Most of the stuff that I plant survives all year or dies back in the winter and then comes back again in the spring. And there's a lot of good symbolism in the resurrection process and flowers and things dying in life cycles. So enjoyed that. We've got a new property. We acquired another house across the street there that they use. They call it the Serendipity House, and they do some Sunday school class and additional meetings in there. And I've been gardening around it now for maybe 3 or 4 years. The edible garden it's been there about 4 years now. Just the fruit trees are just coming to the point where they're going to really start bearing, and that's exciting. We're pleased about all that.
What about the plants themselves? Are those, did you purchase, or were you able to get some from other folks?
Yes to all the above. Not long after I started gardening here, we had a big field day one day and got people to bring things and donate things, and a lot of them brought perennial flowers that are still here that have been there for 17 or 18 years, and planted at different places around the church. But things that I got out of my parents' yard, my sister and I went down when they went and when they sold their house. We went and got things out of the yard and put them in my yard and her yard and at the church yard, and I still divide things from my yard and bring here. And there are several people at the church who bring me things from time to time to use. It's great to have so much property because I can almost use everything somebody wants to give me, because things need to be replaced from time to time. But at the same time, I do go and purchase things on occasion. And when I see there's a spot that I think we need to focus on for a little bit, I'll go and buy something to do there. Never really worked with a budget here. It's just been kind of, they trust me to do whatever needs to be done. And I keep asking for guidance, and they say, well, you're the only one that we know that you are the guidance. So I just kind of do whatever I feel like is the best thing to do. I know plants really well and what works well and where to put things and how to take care of them.
And was that all just from when you were talking about you got started gardening kind of in adulthood, or did you have older relatives who instructed you at all as a child or growing up?
Both my parents were lived in rural North Louisiana, 40-acre farms, and raised cotton and corn, and had chickens and cows and pigs and horses and big vegetable gardens. And I went up and stayed with them some as I was growing up. And that my dad would keep a garden when he could at our house. So I learned some of him. And we moved around a lot in Brookhaven. There was a housing shortage there when we first moved there. In fact, we lived in a barracks for the first year we were there. But then we moved around a lot. I lived in 10 different houses while I was growing up there. And I was always the one who was in charge of taking care of the yard. I had an older brother, but he really wasn't interested in and my sisters didn't care too much about it, so I did, and I liked it, and I always felt a real strong connection with nature from an early age, and I would drive around Brookhaven and find where wild blackberries were and wild plums, and and my mother would make jams and jellies and things. So I was the picker. Uh, and I think I started liking to work in the yard. I remember planting flowers from seeds when I was maybe 12 or 13, and just kind of continued that and kept house plants. And when my parents finally built a house, I really worked helping my mother make her flower beds and tilling them up and adding chicken manure and old sawdust and whatever else we could find there, and rich them up and make her flower beds. She was so excited to have them. So worked on that, and a really big garden plot there at that house. But also, like when I went at the governor's mansion, there were things that they wanted that I didn't know how to do. So I just went to the library. And they wanted to have a rose garden there and wanted roses on their desks all the time. So I just went and read up on roses. And then the chef wanted an herb garden, so we planted an herb garden. I went and read on that, figured out how they'd lay them out and what to plant and where to do that. And then they wanted a cutting garden, so I went and studied. So a lot of that, I learned a lot, taught myself a lot, read a lot, and just practiced gardening there. And had been gardening some before, of course, before I went there, but there were still things that I learned there. And now there's stuff that I don't really understand or know about. I'm quick to go on the internet and look up and find out what I need to know.
Well, and there seems to be such a culture of gardening, in the South, but in Jackson, there's a lot of
there are lots
who are
of
interested in it and are very serious about it. So.
And a lot of folks here in the church are really good gardeners and really sharing gardeners. We do, our Wells Fest is every fall, and I do a plant sale at Wells Fest, and people in the congregation bring things to put in the booth for us to sell to raise money for whoever our beneficiary is. Harbor House this year. So there's lots
So for
of
that, you just you get donations, and then do you root anything? It's my third winter now. I have a greenhouse I had built onto the back of my garage, and in the spring, whatever I've had in the winter, I plant here or at my house, and then through the spring and the summer, I start potting this stuff. Anything I see that will live, I'll cut or dig and put in pots and keep in the greenhouse through the summer, and then so I collect. It's full by Wells Fest time, which is the end of September. So I usually have a couple hundred things to sell that I've gotten together, and then people in the church bring them there and contribute to the plant sale there. Which good. We sold $750 worth of plants this fall. Yeah. I would think you have lots of return customers now.
It's beginning to get that way. We've only done the plant sale for maybe 4 years now.
Oh, okay.
4 or 5 years, but there are people who come back and say, "Oh, I come by from you every year." So I'm beginning to get some return customers, and I'm getting making good connection, good publicity. I'm buddies with Felder Rushing, and he's been promoting for us, and he helps me identify things and and divides things, and we share. And I have lots of good gardening friends that I share. We give each other stuff and share it with each other and start new things. And I always like something new and different. So if anybody has anything new, and I know the nurseries, I've been gardening enough around for myself and other folks for the last 15 years, 20 years, that they know know me when they see me coming and know what I like, and will call me and say, "Oh, we've got something here that you won't find every day," and so I'll come and do that for them. And a friend brings me trays of flowers that she'll start for me to use here or at the church and at my house. Yeah.
Now you said it's just been life support, I guess, since this dry weather we've had. So
yeah, it really has been.
Haven't really started anything new lately, I guess.
This year, back in the spring this year, we had really good rains through the spring and on up until July the 4th, when it really turned hot and dry. So, it was a good spring back there. And I do have several new things that I've planted here and at my house that are new and managed to keep alive for the summer. Right, the week after Wells Fest, we're also busy getting ready for Wells Fest the last Saturday in September. It's hard to get anybody to do much of anything else, so we wait, and once Wells Fest is over, we planted a fall garden. So we planted a lettuce and kale and collard greens and turnip greens and mustard greens and broccoli and peppers and onions and cabbages and those sorts of things that are in the garden over there now. They're just coming along pretty good now. The rain will help them a lot. They'll really jump now that it's gotten cooler and wetter.
And is that, well, most of that stuff, will you cover it, or how do you?
Most of that survives.
Just survives.
Yeah. And once it gets up big enough, the people will start eating it.
So you have neighborhood people who know they just go and get what they need out of there?
Yeah. When we first started doing the gardening, we planted all the fruit trees and started planting vegetables and things. The neighborhood people would come by and say, "Where's your fence?" And we say, "Well, we don't have a fence." And they say, "Well, you won't have anything." And we say, "Well, it's not for us; it's for you." And some of them have, are really use it a lot. And a couple of the close neighbors kind of helped me watch out for it, and run people off when they're messing up, or and help me teach people how to harvest. Because a lot of the things like collard greens, when you harvest, you just take off the big old leaves and leave the young new ones there. But people would come and pull up the plant, so to teach them how to use the garden, and having people in the neighborhood are helpful in that regard, and they've come to adopt it. After we had the garden for a couple of years there, kept wanting to. I wanted to have a statue in the middle of it. I decided I really would like to have it. And I really thought St. Francis would just really be so cool to have right here in the middle of the garden. And Keith said he thought it was a great idea too. He wanted to do that. So again, we asked for donations and got plenty of money, and went to there's a place called Four Seasons Garden statuary or whatever out from Crystal Springs. So a group of us got together and went down there to visit. They have about 2 acres of statues and pots and benches and tables and all sorts of garden concrete cast things. So there were I think 5 or 6 of us went, and we all spread out and looked all over the whole 2 acres, and we all came back and we all wanted the same thing. And it was an angel holding a torch called Angel of Light. And we so we bought that, and then a little picnic table with some benches around it, concrete. We were concerned at first about putting statuary over there, because it's a pretty interactive neighborhood, and we thought maybe it'd be risky, But they've adopted the garden and the statue, and I come and find it decorated from time to time, with sundry things. It's really.
So it's become a space, maybe a space of worship, or just
well, and they come
reverence.
They'll come and sit at the picnic table and walk in the garden and harvest things, and I'm finding out what they really like, and I try to plant what I see that they will use. They love peppers, so I've got lots of different kind of peppers planted that they come and harvest from, and they just walk through the garden, and it's kind of a shortcut. They'll shortcut through the garden a fair amount too, so which is cool. Yeah. So we didn't try to disrupt any of that. There were a couple of corners where they cut where there's deep trails, we leave those, and we wanted to still be their neighborhood, their garden.
Right. Well, let's talk about kind of other stuff at church that Are you involved in any of the other ministries, or is it just primarily the?
Primarily the garden. It's the main thing. I'm here several days a week taking care of that. I am in the choir. I do sing in the choir, and I love our choir, particularly James Martin. Do you know James?
Yes.
Just a dynamite man, and I hadn't been singing in the choir. I thought about it, but once he came and I saw who he was and was exposed, I thought I'd be a fool to not go in, and they needed more men, and I can read music, and if you put a bass on both sides, I can do pretty good. So I really enjoyed doing that and singing in the choir, and
How is he as a music minister in that? I know him as a performer, but curious to know as a choir leader in that.
oh, lots of fun, but also takes care of business, and there's a lot of responsibility there, a lot of music to choose, a lot of programs to do for, besides just our regular Sunday services, weddings and funerals and other things, conference things, and he's active at Millsaps and lots of different areas. But he's really enjoyable to sing with, and very helpful and instructive, and tolerant and complimentary. Just I consider I thought I knew he was a blessing when he first walked in the door. When he first came, our Keith had been just diagnosed with cancer for the third time, and both of our associate pastors were leaving and had asked to move on, and we were just kind of at a stunned there for a little bit and weren't sure exactly what was going to happen to us. And James came and he lifted the church up just with his presence and his performance and what he got the choir to do, and his positive reassurance that everything was just fine. And
has he kept the spirit of the music, or has he changed in terms of selection and things? How is it different from before?
we've always been very eclectic about whatever we do, and for anything from rock and roll to gospel to soul music to high church to old-fashioned gospel singing, and we still sing mostly from the hymn book as a congregation. The choir music varies from classical to new to other old-fashioned, long standard music. At the same time, he's brought a much healthier dose of African American music to the church, and shared that, and he's so generous with his talent, which we all love. About a month ago, we do a communion on the first Sunday of the month, and he just side during communion he sang throughout communion while they were, we'll all come down and sit at the table, and then they'll say a prayer and dismiss a group, and then another group will come, and he just sang through the whole thing, and just and got better and better and more into it. And by the end of the service, he was just so full of the Spirit. It just changed the whole service. It was just beautiful. He's a good man. Yeah. But there are not other ministries in the church that I'm particularly involved in right now. These seems to take up what time I have to give between the gardening and getting ready for Wells Fest and the choir.
How did you get? So Wells Fest hasn't been a long-term thing. How did that get
It
started?
has been.
But the plant sale, you said.
The plant sale,
is a newer element of it.
Yeah, but Wells Fest itself has been for 30-something years.
Sure, right. So how did they approach you to do the
No,
booth, or?
I did that.
Okay.
I decided I wanted to do it, and just talking with people, and I just thought it would be a good fit and something that I could do.
Well, it fits with all the other sale things that they already do there, so
Sure.
it makes it a natural fit.
Yeah. And I've got the best spot. I'm right between the stage and the coffee shop, so I can dance to the music all day and sell plants and things as well. It's led me to one other thing that I'm just getting started on, a new project I'm working on, that not associated with the church, but I want to start a nature spot for the city, in the city, and have been talking about with a good number of folks on you know where North Side, where Riverside Drive is, between Woodrow Wilson and Riverside Drive, behind the National Guard headquarters, behind the Brookhaven soccer field, baseball field, and the Salvation Army. There's woods that belong to the state. So I'm on a mission to acquire use of that property and change it into some nature spot sometime. I really want it to be a sacred space, and to put different things in there that will make it that, and help foster that.
That would be great.
It's a really interesting spot, and I've gotten lots of good support. I'll probably have some community-wide meeting about that before long to do.
Are there any existing trails or anything going into it, or?
I lived in Brookhaven for a good number of years and would walk by there, and I always wanted to get up in there, but it's really heavily undergrown. You just couldn't walk. So I have since this spring, I just took loppers and clippers and made trails so I could walk in and look at it, because it's a really interesting property, and it's really a drainage basin. There's huge gullies that come around and take all the drainage water off Woodrow Wilson and from over by the Highway Patrol and the VA's medical center. All that drains under the Woodrow Wilson and through this particular property, and then under Riverside Drive, between St. Mary and Piedmont, and on over to Laurel Street Park. But all of the whole property slopes right down in one thing. So it's going to require some bridges and some other work to make it accessible. But I'm pretty committed to making that happen, just as a personal project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about here at the church? Do you have any kind of short or long-term things with the gardens that you're thinking about?
No, I'm kind of pretty much into maintain mode right now. The property increased a lot from the time that I first got here. It's probably at least doubled in scope and things that I've had to take care of. We have a guy who goes to church here, Philip Morgan. He and his partner Bob Kirsch have a landscape service, and they come and every once a week, and I say mow and weed eat and blow leaves and keep the property cleaned up in that way. And then whenever I need help with pruning all the hedges or digging new flower beds or doing things that I don't feel like I could tackle on my own, he'll send me his crew to do whatever I want to do.
Great.
Yeah, I did it all kind of myself for maybe 10 years or so, and then except for the mowing and edging, but it's really been helpful to have him and to know that if there's anything that I do want to do, that I got help to do it, and they have the equipment and the manpower to do that, and donate it to the church.
That's great.
Which really makes gardening great. I typically plan out what we plant and do the planting and weeding and mulching and pruning, and then they do the help with the rest of it.
Real heavy-duty labor kind
Well,
of stuff.
it takes a couple of guys, most of a morning to come over here and to mow and to edge things and to blow leaves off and keep things looking good for Sunday. They'll come on Friday or Saturday and take care of all of that. But then when things get looking ragged, I know get them to come and help me do stuff.
I think we've covered a lot. Is there anything in terms of your time here, or other things about the church that you think we should hit on before we close out the recording?
Not that I can think of. We were at a point where Keith has been here now for 6 years, and he's about to turn 80, and vows to stay as long as he can, and still, preaches without notes and every Sunday. And but we've gotten associate pastor and James Martin coming in, so I feel like we're also ready to move on and to stay and to do whatever happens in the future. That we intend to stay here and be here as a church and continue on the missions that we've got that everybody seems to be happy about.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate
it.
Anytime.